let's see here. So in the right-hand column, I just pasted the notes document. Barrett, can I extend the last session's privilege to you again to take notes? Great. I'm going to take that silence as a yes. So you can jump in there.
Yeah, I can do it.
Great. So if you jump in there, you can see April 3rd assembly agenda. I've actually thrown something together really hastily. We'll sort of check in with it after we've done introductions and shape the agenda a little bit. Okay, so before we jump in, welcome. This is the first Open Referral Assembly we've done, I think, in a month or so. We keep these semi-regular. Don't try to waste people's time if there's not all that much to talk about. But there have been a bunch of advances recently and new projects that are forming, so I'm really looking forward to talking about some of that stuff with you. Let's go ahead and have introductions from everybody. Share who you are, in what way have you been working on this project so far, and questions that you have that you'd like us to talk about, and any or agenda items that you'd like somebody else to talk about. So I can go ahead and call on y'all unless somebody wants to jump forth.
Sure, I'll start. My name is Saskia DeVries. I'm working on the Code for DC Open Referral project. My interest right now is on data entry and how we're working with DC organizations to match everything to the fields that are in the specs. And I was the one who sent out that email asking about intake specifically.
I'm going to paste the text of that email into this notes document. And we'll read it when we get there. Who's next?
I'll go next. So yeah, I'm Barrett Pittner. I am a trained journalist. Greg and I have been talking about open referral for about a year or so, and recently I kind of got a bit more involved. As a journalist, you've basically figured out how to solve problems, articulate things in a way that people can digest, and the complexity of this issue necessitates that. I also did some tech reporting, and that involved organizing hackathons and getting tech people in the same space and have them address issues to try to fix stuff. And so there's definitely a need for that, to try to troubleshoot and get the the information from the ground and get the techies together and figure out a way to make stuff work. And so that's kind of what I do.
Hey, Medita, welcome. Sounds like we don't have audio on you. Okay. Haley, while Nivedita does some troubleshooting, go ahead. Looks like
Hi,
she jumped off. Hi.
I'm Haley Pate. I am working with Code for America to work on the HSDS, and I'm here to help people troubleshoot if you want to take the spec on and try to use it. I'm here to help with that, and all around just be the data cheerleader.
Cool. So Haley actually was a member of the work group on our last go-round and was an active participant in our workshop last summer, and also is one of the only people, I think, if not the only person in our network who has successfully implemented a data standard. And Haley, it would be great after, if we talk a little bit, to share some of your insight from that experience and how it might apply here. But I think we've got Nivedita back. How's it going? Troubleshot? Nope, still no. Okay, so you might be able to, you can chat into the column, into the sidebar, and I'll keep a lookout for whatever you type in, and we can read it aloud. the work that you've been doing on the validator that you're planning to do is definitely one of the important things that we want to talk about on this call. So let's see how we can work around the technical mishap. Let's see. Okay. So for the agenda that I put together so far, based on what I've been hearing from folks, we just did introductions. Well, I can give a little bit of an update of what's happening in the initiative, what's happening in some of our pilot projects. Then I have set aside time for spec questions. Saskia has asked one. We can sort of talk about others. And we also want to talk about the validator project that Nivedita is working on. And there's another project, if we have time, that I'd like to sort of talk about that we're starting to sketch out. And if we really have a lot more time, we can talk about the licensing proposal that I've put forth, which is pretty nerdy stuff, but really important. So anybody have other suggestions for the agenda? Questions? Things we should definitely cover? Specific subpoints within any of that? Okay. So let's hold on. I'm also going to chat into this box. I've mentioned Nivedita's validator a few times. I'm chatting it over here. You can see what it is that we're talking about. It's basically, this is actually developed. You can poke around with it while I'm doing updates. It was developed back with one of the first iterations of the spec, and she's now planning to develop it for the new version of the specification. It basically enables you to share files and, well, post files and say, like, are all the key fields in this file, is it complete or not? Which is a basic but important thing to be able to do. So, okay, I'll share some updates while we're hopefully waiting for Nivedita to join us again. So we published the version 1.0 of the Human Services Data Specification last month in March. We've brought Haley on in partnership with Code for America to do some, to aid in the process of field testing of this specification and evaluating, whether it's, meeting the needs of our various stakeholders. And Haley can speak a little bit more to her role in that regard. In the meantime, we have pilot projects in DC and San Francisco and Alameda. The San Francisco Bay Area has a number of different kinds of organizations in different counties that are sort of approaching different ways to use this specification to exchange data. We also have a live pilot in Chicago, in as much as Purple Binder, which is a vendor that has comprehensive data for Chicago area resources. They put an API on their system, and you have external applications that are accessing their database using that API, speaking the Open Referral language. Declan of Purple Binder, who is super active in the development of the specification, passes on his regrets. He's actually in the air right now, so he's not able to join us. And we also have a new pilot in Miami, Florida, my hometown, Woo. The 211 in Miami handed over a test version of its database to the Code for Miami Brigade, which has sort of halfway successfully transformed that data into the Open Referral specification and loaded it into Ohana. And I say halfway because I think there were a lot of fields that didn't quite map, that maybe could map, but we might have to do some research into how the 211 in Miami structures its data in order to better understand what's going to actually make it work. It's definitely you can see how complex this challenge is by looking at how far they were able to get with just a few volunteers. So that's a quick overview of the pilot projects and the specification. Any questions about any of that? How that's working? Who's involved? Anything like that? Okay. Cool. No questions. So maybe we should jump right into talking about the specification. If it's all right, I'd love to toss to Haley a little bit and hear from her, a little bit about the work she's been doing, and especially in the context of your experience with implementing data standards and the kinds of questions that you're asking or that you're hearing other people ask, and the kinds of insights that you're looking for, and anything else you want to share with us.
Okay. Sorry, it took me a second to hit my mute button. But let's see. Well, my background in data standards started with working in hospitals, and namely trauma centers. And I've used data standards to help send information from the database I was working with at a hospital to a national database that collected information about injured patients for injury prevention. And going through that experience of, like looking at this data standard, and actually it went more like this. I was parked in front of a database and given this book of data standards and was like, okay, we need to do that. I went, okay. And so going through, learning, like what a standard was, trying to make my data work with it, and then eventually that's how I got into this stuff. And then I ended up doing the same thing in a couple other hospitals, and eventually moved to Sacramento so that I could do the same type of work, but for this whole state of California. And so when I got to California, my plate expanded to ambulance and pre-hospital data standards. And then I would advise counties and different agencies on how to use their data standards and implement their own. So data standards can take a lot of flavors and a lot of forms, and it all depends on the problem we're trying to solve. And in our case with Open Referral, we have a lot of big complex problems to solve. So what my advice is that it has been that we start really, really small and simple and with the loudest user case. And when we went to the Open Referral Summit last July, that user case, loud and clear, was people in the community sharing data with each other. So that's what I am working on the work to get ready for the work group around the HSDS to carry that forward. And let's see, other than work with the help get the work group started up again, I am hoping to take specific data sets that are actually out there from different communities, hopefully pilot projects, and I need to profile those data sets to see if they have all the basic ingredients required to even play with the HSDS. That's sort of the first step. Can people even play with this spec? And then I think we'll take it from there. And also to be a resource for everyone else with questions and things like that.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley. I have a little bit to expand on regarding something Haley said, but first, does anybody have questions for Haley or comments? So she mentioned the work group, and so for some quick context there, when we first really got started developing the specification, we formed a work group consisting of folks who had experience, especially in the information and referral field, and with data standards. It was just 4 people in the group, including the sort of lead on the iCarol software platform, which was the first vendor to say we want to do this, and also a developer who actually helped develop the AIRS, the 211 schema, like 10 years ago. And we also had Haley on the group. That work group sort of like did its work. We have a specification. We still need an ongoing sort of governance process. And so over the next couple weeks, we're putting together that framework, that proposed framework, which we'll share for feedback of how we're going to reform this work group, what kind of people we want on it, what are going to be their responsibilities, probably relating to addressing issues in the specification as they arise from our pilots, as our pilots start to actually try to use it, prioritizing those issues, and making proposals for how to address them in ways that meet users' needs. And so we will be sort of looking around for people who might want to join that work group. We'll be figuring out like how much work is actually involved, what kind of work. We're open to suggestions, and look for that proposal in the next week or so. And we actually we have a good opportunity to game this out a little bit here, in that Saskia actually mentioned a specific question that came up through her work with users entering information into Bread for the City's sort of prototyped resource directory, which was built with the Open Referral model. So Saskia, I pasted your email into this document, but do you want to recap the issue for us?
Sure. So we had volunteers coming in to enter from a list of social service providers that we had set, and as they were exploring the website, some of them noticed that providers have special intake hours, and that some providers will only see clients who have been through the intake process. So the intake hours are usually really restrictive. They're often like maybe 2 days a week for a 3 or 4 hour window. And we were trying to figure out how to convey this information in the open referral format so that as people access this information, first they know that they need to do intake, and also they can see what the intake hours are separate from the organization's regular hours.
Wow, that's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there are a couple ways to introduce that constraint or that extra bit of information into the model. I definitely, off the top of my head, don't put that in the current model.
Well, there is
So that's a great little tidbit to think about. I'm writing that down.
So what I had recommended at the time, just to keep everyone moving, is to call intake a service, so that you can put its own hours on it in any specific directions for intake. But the next question after that, if we agree that intake is a service, which is still a question, how are we going to mark that for all of the other services that require intake to access them?
That's a great question, and I really like that approach. That's actually what I was thinking would be the best way, although I don't know if it would be the best for you guys, because it's almost like a little extra work. You should create another record, right? Intake is its own service. But do you think the challenge is creating a relationship between the intake and then the service it belongs to, or is the challenge that lots of different services have their own intake hours? And
I think it depends on who the user is. If the user is a social worker, I don't think it's a lot of extra work to see for all other services. The step one of applying is going to intake. But if we have users who aren't familiar with the organizations or this whole process, going to a website and searching for food or something like that, it'd be interesting to see how at least intake shows up on the search results to make sure that the people who are looking for a specific resource see that they're required to do intake.
Absolutely. That's a great use case to test with. That's really important. And you know what? Yeah, this is a really good one, because I could see that as having a need to have more than one record to present, to tell the whole story about other things people might be looking for, not just intake, So we could, this is a great thing for us to kick around when we are moving forward with the spec. I don't have answers today. Maybe I can let this marinate, and I can check up, you and I can check in soon, maybe even after this call, and hash through it a little more.
Sure.
All right.
And it is a good example, because there is a field for application process, and if I'm recalling from previous times that this question came up, the assertion was, for now, application process is a text field. You can enter this information into that text field, and then but the question is whether this should actually be treated as its own entity.
Check in soon, maybe even after this call, and hash through it a little more.
Sounds like we just got a little bit feedback loop. So anyways, I think that's to say, Saskia, that at the moment, given the spec as it is, my sense is that using the application process field is the right answer. We might want a standardized way to present intake within the application field, or even if that's just like standardized for breadth of the field.
Can I chime in? I think it's.
Sure.
I don't think it's. I think there's a little more to it than that.
I think somebody has a
Yeah.
somebody's got us on feedback loop.
Not me.
So anyways, I think that's to say, Saskia, that let's see here. Hold on, I'm gonna. Given the spec as it is, where is this coming from?
Mine's muted, so it can't be on my end.
Okay.
Maybe it's Anne?
But y'all are getting it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my microphone might be working now.
Okay.
Ah.
And again, I wasn't. I certainly wasn't saying what I was saying earlier, as in like this is the correct answer, so much as within the spec as it is, as far as I understand it, that field is intended for information such as this. That might not be the right way to do it, but.
So Greg, the application process field, it doesn't have the relationship to the schedule items in the spec that's going to give Saskia the level of information that she seems to be asking for.
Yep.
So, but like I said, Saskia, let's connect if you have time, right after this, or I'll schedule time with you, and we'll hash through some options.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Does anybody else have other sort of technical questions about the spec or issues that have come up? I mean, we could talk about some of the issues that have come up in the GitHub repo. Some people have said this or that, but we can also move on to talk about this validator project that Nivedita is working on. Hearing nothing, let's have Nivedita go ahead and introduce yourself, because I'm not sure that you were able to do that earlier, and tell us a little bit about what you've worked on so far and what you'd like to work on, any questions you have, that sort of thing.
Right. Hi. Can you hear me now? Just checking.
Sounds great.
All right, great. So hi, I'm Nivedita. I'm a student at Carnegie Mellon, and I'll be graduating in May. So last year I was working on Open Referral on making a validation tool. This was kind of like a class project because they encouraged us to work on open source projects, and we found this very interesting, and we actually got in touch with the people at Ohana, and they recommended Open Referral to us. So basically, I worked on making a validation tool. So there is a validation tool up and online for version 0.1, which was, I think, the version in May last year. And since then, I haven't really done that much work on it because the specification was in flux. So Greg suggested I just wait for version 1.0 to come out and then, deal with that one and update the tool. So yeah, I'm going to be working on that soon. I really haven't started because I've been busy with some schoolwork and all. But yeah, so any suggestions on what that should look like? I can send a link to the existing validation tool. Just give me a sec.
I played with that validation tool, and I thought it was great.
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciated your feedback on it. Thank you so much.
Let me see if I can screen share it so we can all see it. I'm going to try
All right, yeah, that would be great. Do you have the link?
Yep, I've got it up.
Okay.
Let me see. Here it is. Okay. Does everybody see that?
No.
Oh,
yeah, it's up now.
I see it.
So
Yep.
it says version 1.0, and what it has here is a slot for every type of file that comprises at least that previous version of this data model. And so the idea was that the format consists of a bundle of CSV files. You can load one to each one, and it will. I don't actually have any here. I think Haley might have some, but basically you load an organization CSV file which has like all the fields of information that are related to an organization, and it tells you, these fields are present or not. If I'm describing that correctly, is that right?
Right. Yeah,
Do you want to
basically,
add
if
anything?
it's
Yeah.
all good, it turns green, and if it's not, it spits out some errors for you to fix.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's one of the things I really like about this tool is I think I like how the CSVs are broken out. I think a lot of our early adopters, especially folks that are using just like Excel spreadsheets at smaller, organizations, they're not going to have these big packages or a JSON file to describe their package like the version 1.0 currently asks for. They're going to have these little CSV files describing different parts of the data they have. So I feel like this is a really great way for them to pull those parts out and plug them in and see, and get some feedback. And I liked how when I had an invalid field, the validator said, oh, this field is invalidated or invalid. And I was like, oh, cool. And so I think there's just a ton of help there, especially for folks who've never put a CSV file together before. So great job, Nuveta. Like, I think I think a lot of people will use it.
Yeah, so I'm planning on working in the next couple of weeks on just updating it as it is currently, but with the new files in there and all the changes that have been made, and not dealing with the JSON part for now. And maybe we can have another web page that you can go to if you want to do the entire JSON package.
That's really cool. But so there would be two, because I think both are good.
Yeah, I think both are good, and they deal with different needs. So as you said, for the smaller organizations, they'd prefer to just upload one CSV at a time and validate that. But later, further down the road, someone might want to put together a whole JSON and the entire package, and might not want to keep uploading each file because that could get tedious too. I think there might be a lot of files involved.
Great. So this is a great example of us thinking about different types of users, and which we're going to have to be doing a lot because we have a lot of different levels of, tech savviness and tools available in our user space. So right. I'm so stoked that you have the time and are willing to build on this for us. It's a wonderful gift. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate and I hope it will be useful for people. Yeah.
Right on.
Great.
All right. So we're working our way through the agenda here. I actually have only a couple other things that have come up, and so I can share them with y'all, and then I'm interested to see if there's anything else y'all want to talk about while we have some time left. Let's take that first. Any other questions, comments come up, things we should add on to this agenda? Okay. So let's take this government published data issue first. This has been one that's been bubbling up for over the course of the last year, and I think the time is right for us to really start addressing it now that we have a specification. I think we can really look at this issue and maybe identify some actionable items. So I'm pasting into this document a brief memo, but I can just tell you the gist of the memo. Basically, it's saying government federally in this particular instance, but also on a state and local level, government agencies provide some services and they fund many others. And currently, every single referral provider has to manually call up the government agency or peck through their website, at least once a year if they want accurate data on the services that government itself is providing. So that's all this labor that's being distributed and duplicated, whereas government could simply publish data on the services that it provides and maybe even publish data on the services that it funds in a way that referral systems could simply consume automatically. If it was made available in our format, we could demonstrate how, with a translator or whatnot, you could simply suck in the data that's coming right from the government in bulk, in machine-readable format. And so the first step is to assay the data that's currently available, to take a look at it, do a comparative analysis between the information that's available from a government API and the information that's in our spec. And we've done a little bit of that analysis at first. Monsef looked at a number of APIs that are available on government websites that supposedly have service directory information. And what we found is a common pattern where these data sets that are published usually have like just the name of the organization, maybe a description, maybe even not, the address, and nothing about like what, or very little about what is the actual service that's provided here, a set of services provided here, what are the hours of operation, how do you access this service, that sort of thing. And government agents, especially, like there are many people in government right now who are trying to demonstrate that open data is valuable, worth government's time to figure out how to publish machine-readable open data. And so this very well could be a great opportunity for governments to explain this even just to themselves, and for us to demonstrate that like this is one potential valuable source and use for a standardized format. And so a first step is to do that sort of comparative analysis between existing tables, existing data, and what we have in our spec, and also to start exploring like what are other high-value services, important services that are hard to keep track of, that government either provides itself or funds, that we can sort of point to as important early use cases. I'm in the process of thinking through like who might be able to help us do this comparative analysis on some of these data sets and bring some of that insight to various roundtables that are happening, and also various other sort of feedback loops where the government's saying like basically tell us what data you need.
Hey Greg, so is this a new project?
I mean, it's an old idea that I think is reaching the point where it's ready to become a project. And we have Haley. You and I worked on, or we're at the California HHS Open Data Fest, and I developed one of these memos. It's based on the Federal Service Directory memo, specific to California.
Okay.
And so in each case, we have 3 or 4 directory data sets. At the government at the federal level, it's like HRSA, which is like rural healthcare services. They have an API on rural healthcare clinics, and the Veterans Administration, they have an API of veterans VA clinics. And we've looked at some of these and only find like a name and an address, or name and address and phone number, but not really like the extensive information. And what I'm hearing back from government folks is like they're like, tell us what information you need, and we can see if we have it. And that would be a big win for them and for not just us in the initiative, but any referral provider would then be able to like automatically consume this information into their system. So
yeah, it sounds like a new use case and a new user story. So which is a great one. Needs to be on the radar for sure.
Yep. Questions about that, or thoughts or suggestions? If somebody's interested in that particular project, I think this is the kind of thing that we could bring to like a civic technology meetup or a Code for America brigade, and say who wants to take this on. It would be great to actually have someone who's thinking about this whole initiative from a high level, who's then ready to like get into the nitty-gritty and make some recommendations, basically.
I would be interested. Do you know what the timeline is, though?
We do not have a set timeline. I do know that the California HHS, they're having like an open data roundtable in the first week of May, I think. And so I'm hoping in the California pilot or somehow to be able to bring like at least an initial comparative analysis between what they have and what we're saying is important to that roundtable. I also know that the Veterans Affairs Administration, the VA, is also having a roundtable. I'm actually talking with somebody in their executive team later today. So yeah, we don't really have any deadlines on this. So it's flexible.
Just curious, who is we?
We, the collective we.
Okay.
Right, like for California, there's that specific date of like early May when HHS is hosting a roundtable. So that's a target date for the California stakeholders. For the federal stuff, it's really open-ended. But ideally, the earlier we can demonstrate the value of what it is that we're talking about, the more sources of support we can shake out the more kinds of data that we'll be able to find that could be useful. So.
Yeah, my big thought concerning that is just making sure we don't that's gonna be a lot of data concerning from the government. So just making sure it's like specific and not drowning ourselves in data and kind of like be too consumed with that. Like the Veterans Association sounds great. That in itself would be a lot of data, but it would be like a specific use case, and we could probably show a benefit more efficiently and effectively by kind of narrowing it down.
Yep.
+1.
Okay. So I have one other topic, and we can save some time just for see what else comes up at the end, or we can jump off early. Pasting this over here. This was a proposal that I made about the licensing of the Open Referral model, and I ended up making it right before we were finishing the transition from 0.9 to 1.0, and decided to hold it until after we'd actually just gotten the specification out the door and then had a chance to step back and talk. The summary of this proposal is that it deals with open source licensing. And this is a topic that I'm only just learning about. It's pretty complex and challenging, and we're sort of at a bleeding edge where there's a lot of unknowns. So this is going to be a process of discovery and experimentation and ongoing dialogue. It's certainly not a question we're going to answer once and never think about again. My proposal is that we license the Open Referral model, especially at this early phase of development, as not just open source as in anyone can use it and for free and see how it's built and even adapt it. That's all. I think we're all in agreement that we want that to be true. But this particular license that I'm proposing actually goes a step further, and it does place a certain kind of restriction on the use of this model, which is to specifically say, if you want to change this model, you're free to do so. If you want to distribute that change as your own, your own content, your version of this, you're free to do so. But the licensing of the model has to remain open. In other words, you wouldn't be able to take the Open Referral model that we've been developing and tweak some piece of it, build it into your product, and then say, this is my property. The tweaked model would have to remain open source. Even if it's attributed to you and so on and so forth, the license has to essentially be compatible. And I think that's important at the level, at least, of the information model itself, because as we experiment with a lot of different ways to use this information in a lot of different contexts, we do expect people to adapt it to meet their particular needs. We want to ensure that the ecosystem that emerges from this work is interoperable, that applications built over here can talk to applications built over there, that this layer can talk to that layer, and that's going to be an ongoing challenge. And one of the important sort of preconditions to that challenge is ensuring that even as people adapt things in ways that might challenge that interoperability, it remains open source. It remains something that anybody can use in their own way as well. And so I'm putting this forth as really just a starting point for future discussion. I think this is the place that we should start in order to have conversations about how Open Referral's model and also the other elements of this ecosystem, right? Because the model is one thing. The software and the tools that are built to use data that's structured according to this model is another thing that requires other kinds of licenses. And the data that people are going to have flowing through these tools in accordance with this model, that is probably going to require still yet another kind of license. So this gets pretty complex, and I think we should start from this place of saying, one way or the other, we know that we want anything that's going to use this model to remain open source as a point of departure for future conversations. And I think this very well could emerge into its own topic, potentially for like a subgroup within the Open Referral Working Group. I think we're thinking now and would love input now into how that should work. And this is based on my interviews with folks in the field and my studies of how licensing regimes have evolved in the past. this strikes me as a good starting point. We're not like deciding on this call or anything. I'm just sort of, going back to this proposal that's been made that so far has gotten positive feedback and reviewing it while we're all face to face. Any questions or thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because due to the many different use cases, it's inevitable that people are going to have to make these modifications, but there has to be like a control point so that it doesn't kind of get out of whack, because if there's a modification that someone makes and the next group is making a modification on that modification, then a modification on that, it could really spin out of control and create the problem that we've been trying to avoid, where things don't work together. So if it's kind of, we know that there's this one structure that you branch off of, and it kind of works that way, I think it allows for the inevitable modifications that are going to need to happen, but will allow a continued level of interoperability. So it makes sense to me.
I am going to be developing visual aids and organizing in-depth conversations with experts. Like in a future assembly, we might have someone on who really does have a knack for the legal implications of this pretty emergent field of copyleft. So this is certainly not like the end of the conversation. And I think there are things that we have to do to make this conversation easier for various people to participate in who don't necessarily have a framework for the technical elements or even the legal elements. We want to be able to visualize those elements at a glance so that people understand the different implications. So that's all coming. I would love, if anybody's interested in this stuff, if this lights your fire, I would love to have you working with me on it.
What are the arguments against this license from the perspective of open referral?
The arguments against this license, so currently it's licensed as like Creative Commons 0, which is essentially public domain, which means anybody can take this and use it and do whatever they want with it, period. Right? There's no restrictions whatsoever. And I think the arguments for that is like we want to encourage innovation, and we want to encourage like people to use it, as many people to use it as possible. And there are going to be some contexts in which businesses are going to view their use of it, and if they businesses are going to think, well, if we take this and modify it and build it into our business model, we need to own that, right, and retain control over that because it's our property now. If we've done a significant enough alteration, and this is the kind of balance that we're going to have to strike, right? These are just tensions that we have to navigate. We want people to innovate. We want it to be as used as possible. And we also want to protect our users from essentially a somewhat natural and in our world even encouraged process of of private property, essentially of enclosure. I think there's a happy balance to be struck among businesses being able to use and adapt this kinds of content to meet their own needs, without essentially becoming like the sole proprietor of that content, or preserving its openness. And it's definitely just going to be an ongoing challenge for us, and we're only just starting that conversation here.
Yeah, it seems like if there aren't the restrictions, it would inevitably create the problems that we are trying to fix by having open referral, where the technology would become siloed. Each group would have their own. They wouldn't be working together, yep. And then, not everybody would get access to the data,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
All right. No, I think it makes sense. I haven't heard of something like that before. So
yeah, the technical term is share alike, right? So the specific license that I'm proposing is Creative Commons 4.0. I won't get into like the mumbo jumbo about like the difference between 4.0 and 3.0, but the important thing is that you can share this, you can make derivatives about it, but if you change the license, you have to share it alike. You have to share it in the same license. So, and there's similar considerations at the level of the data, And I think, I think a case can be made that we want to let some of these licensing considerations be decided by communities themselves. Because there are various kinds of open data licenses. You could have an open data license that says anybody can use this data, but you can't change it, which in our particular context wouldn't make much sense. But there's other licenses that said anybody can use this data, anybody can change it, but you have to indicate the changes that you've made. And that would make potentially more sense. And there's other kinds that are like anybody can use this for non-commercial purposes, but if you want to build this into your business, you have to pay a fee. And I think those are the kinds of conversations that we want to get into and explore. And we also, there's some of these decisions are decisions that we want people on the ground to make for themselves. But at this level of the model, what I'm saying is, especially in this early formative phase, this is a decision that I think supports us all on staying on the same page and having that balance between the ability to innovate while maintaining the prerogative to ensure that this is open source and potentially interoperable. So thanks for diving in with me to that technical issue. Barrett, did we get notes on that, by the way? Hold on, because I remember what I said, but we'll want to be able to share this back with folks.
I typed some stuff.
Okay, great. And I can help with the notes. And
Yeah,
in the final...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I typed the stuff up, but
Great.
You can probably add some more.
Okay. Any other final thoughts? I'm happy to let us out before the hour is up. Anything else to discuss? Unfortunately, Haley left us. I think Haley will be following up with both of y'all on the projects that you're working on. We'll be in touch offline.
Cool.
When is the next working group forming? The timeline for that?
Good question. Soon, I'm hoping that Haley and I have a document to share with various folks next week, and I'll be also sharing that with potential work group members to get their take. And I'm hoping that that we're in the process of forming this work group by the end of the month.
Cool.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
All right. See ya.
Excellent.
Bye.
Enjoy the weekend.
You too.